Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, July 7th, 2025. Larry Johnson will be here with us in just a moment. But first, this. We all know how devastating war is. Lives lost, communities destroyed. But war can also threaten your financial freedom. That's where America's heading. Our growing involvement in global conflicts. It means more spending, more debt, and a weaker dollar. That's a direct hit to your wallet. So here are three things to keep your eyes on: exploding debt, declining dollar, rising prices of gold and silver. These things are already happening. Goldman Sachs predicts gold could hit $4,500 an ounce by 2026. Why? Because central banks and smart investors are buying gold hand over fist. They know what's coming and they're hedging against it. Currency collapse, inflation, and market volatility. Gold has been a trusted store of value for thousands of years, and today we need that protection more than ever. Call Lear Capital now at 800-511-4620 or visit LearJudgeNap.com. No one is going to protect your wealth for you. You need to do it yourself, and now is the time. Larry Johnson, welcome here, my dear friend. Before we get to the American Zionists, about which you have written an interesting piece lately, what is the current state of affairs in Ukraine? When you and Scott Ritter and I were on at the end of last week, Ritter used an interesting phrase that has made the rounds, referring to Ukraine as in hospice.
Yeah. The Russians are advancing along the entire 1,200 mile front, or 1,200 kilometer. It's over 1,000 miles from north to south, and it's combination that Ukraine does not have the manpower, the trained manpower, to put out into the field to stop the Russians. The contrast is dramatic. We learned last week that Russia is now enlisting between 50 and 60,000 new soldiers every month. Now, those soldiers, when they're enlisted, they're not just being shoved off to the front. No, they're going into training units. Russia is now. Let me give you this stat. This will blow you away. Right now, the United States doesn't build brand new tanks. We take the M1 Abrams, which was built only 30, 40 years ago,
right?
And we refurbish them. And it takes us 2 years to refurbish one of those tanks. And so Russia, however, is building brand new, state-of-the-art T-90 tanks. They build them in 1 month. Okay, right there illustrates this dramatic gap that between the Russian capability and that of the West, and I include Ukraine in the West. So Ukraine doesn't have now the ability to build new factories, because every one of those factories, any place in Ukraine, is going to be hit and targeted by Russia. Russia can take them out with Kinzhal or Iskander missiles. So with lack of troops, lack of ammunition, lack of air defense systems, and it's not like the West is sitting back, holding on to the stuff, saying, well, we got it, but we're just not going to give. We don't have it to give. We're not even producing enough artillery shells to keep them in the fight. And since we're sending a lot of military material to Israel, Ukraine's on the back burner.
You referred to the front as 1,000 miles long. Is it a front like in World War I, where on one side are the Russian troops and the other side of the Ukrainian troops?
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's you've had lines of these towns, particularly in the Donbass, where you get past one security line, you come up to another. They've been fortified. Russia has been breaking those down, and the tactics that they are developing they've evolved over time. Now they're using 6 to 10 guys, and Scott talked about 3 and 6s, but they're using I've seen units as large as 10 to 12 on motorcycles, and they will attack the flanks of these entrenchments, and then it's coordinated with drone strikes, it's coordinated with artillery, and it's coordinated with airstrikes. And so Russia keeps advancing all along, and they're pushing, you go up north to Sumy, and then to Kharkiv, and then all the way down to Zaporizhia at the south, with Luhansk and Donetsk in between. So yes, the conventional forces moving forward against Ukrainian entrenched positions, but these Ukrainian entrenched positions are becoming weaker and fewer.
Now, the Ukrainians are not stupid. Don't they realize what's happening? Or is it just the fervent nationalism that prevents them from accepting reality?
Well, there's an element of delusion there, for sure. And many of the soldiers that have been forced to the front, they're not there voluntarily. We've got the video after video after video of these guys being dragooned off the street, tackled, hogtied, shoved into the back of a vehicle. And but the military leadership, they're now, they see their very survival at stake. And then when you've got the likes of Zelensky, there are some. Budanov, the guy that's the intelligence chief for, I think, the SBU, he admitted the other day he said, hey, to his fellow Ukrainians, if you think we're getting any territory back from the Russians, you're crazy. It ain't coming back. I think they see the end game is underway. It is Russia has just deployed. There's a piece out yesterday that Russia has been putting satellites up into space, and they're doing a couple of different things. One, those satellites are now turning off U.S. satellites, so that the U.S. is going blind in certain areas. That's remarkable. And then on top of it, some of these satellites have the capabilities to actually be used for controlling drones on the ground. So, Russia's not sitting back and relying on old technology. They are moving forward in ways that we in the United States are not able to catch up to yet.
And how much longer can this last? Can it last through the end of 2026 or 2025, this current year that we're in?
Based upon what Putin said last week or 2 weeks ago, I think he fully expects this thing to be done by the end of the year. Because this, it's like a car running on a tank of gas, and it runs and it runs and it runs until you get to the very end when it runs out of gas, and then the engine craps out. That's what's going to happen in Ukraine, because they're running on limited resources. They don't have unlimited manpower. They don't have unlimited supplies of ammunition. Their air defense systems are virtually disappeared now. They're gone. And in the meantime, Russia is expanding its production of drones, and those drones are hitting with more frequency, and it's able to operate basically unimpeded across Ukraine, in the air anyway.
Switching gears, why does the West hate BRICS? Let me restate it. Is it hatred or is it fear?
Yes.
Good answer, Larry.
It is those who understand finance and trends, and are paying attention to what's happening on the global economic front. They are frightened because they recognize that BRICS actually represents, if you will, an existential threat to the U.S. dominance of the world. I ran some of the numbers. I was sort of surprised that if you take the current members and official partners of BRICS, their total population accounts for 55% of the world's population. So they represent a majority of the world on that front, and that's only 21 countries, and you still got other countries lining up that will want to join. I think you'll see more coming out of Africa, as an example. That's number one. In terms of GDP, the gross domestic product measured by what they call purchasing power parity, that basically it adjusts the GDP according to, how expensive, like what does it cost for you to buy a house in New York City or as compared to buying a house in Nigeria? Well, can you buy something comparable, but it's going to be cost differently? So when you look at that comparison, BRICS countries, they account for 45% of the world's gross domestic product as measured by PPP, which means they roughly now, those BRICS members account for 50% of the world's economic activity. So that's where it's headed. And what they're trying to do is create an alternative where they're not held hostage to the US dollar. And, Trump just keeps making the case for him. You saw him today, threatening, you BRICS countries, if you get into that, I'm going to 10% more tariff. That's exactly, they want to get away from that. They're tired of being bullied, threatened, and sanctioned by the United States.
What is the West, probably intelligence services, doing to undermine BRICS?
Assisting with the war against Iran, stirring up trouble in Azerbaijan, working, the CIA's got one of its, I'm told, because I was never briefed on this, but I am told that the CIA has one of the largest presence in throughout, in the world there in Azerbaijan, because it's working to destabilize, carrying out color revolutions in places like Georgia, in Armenia. We want to create as much chaos as possible, principally for Russia and China, in hopes that because as long as they continue to work together, to cooperate together, and to trade together and build up their economies, it's a formidable force. Yeah. The other thing people haven't paid attention to is look at the list of the 10 largest banks in the world. I think China controls 8 of those.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Here's an interesting clip, Larry, from Professor Paolo Nugaria, who's the former executive director of the International Monetary Fund. Take a listen to this. Chris, cut number 5.
Who knows what's in Trump's mind? Who knows what the U.S. is up to? I believe the U.S. has now a very erratic, unpredictable president who doesn't seem to have a clear strategy. You know why I'm happy about Trump? It's that he's doing the job of weakening the superpower that mostly harms the world. He's weakening the U.S. instead of making it great again. So in that respect, I think we need to be thankful for him.
Yeah, I think Noguera Batista, he's right. Trump is harming himself. We see the parallels with what happened with Israel's attack on Iran. Because remember, initially, Trump was ebullient about it. I know everything. I knew the details. And then when it didn't turn out that it looked like it was going to be a disaster, it was turning into a disaster. I didn't know anything. I knew nothing. And I think, as what you and Alistair talked about earlier today, where Trump, he's so insecure, he's looking for that reassurance. Well, the same thing's happening with tariffs, because Trump is convinced, man, the tariffs are a great thing. They're working for me. They're bringing in more money. We're going to be so successful. All I can tell you is one anecdotal experience, but my neighbor who owns, he makes sports equipment. It's manufactured in China. Do you know that the Louisville Slugger now is made in China? It's not made in Louisville, Kentucky.
The baseball bat.
Yeah, the baseball bat. So he's a Trump supporter. He is a conservative. But he was telling me the other day he had a 4th of July party for the neighborhood. And he goes, man, these tariffs are killing me. He said, we just had an order where we had to pay an additional $150,000. We hadn't budgeted for that. And so when you've got people like that voicing concern, and he says it's slowing down. He says what I'm seeing is slowing down the economy. So what's going to happen with Trump and tariffs? I think there's going to come a point where they realize it's hurt the economy, and it's poisoned some of the support in his base, and then Trump does that pivoting. But I think Nogueira's exactly right. Trump's policy, instead of fostering a desire of other countries to come and be our friend and to support the United States, the bombast, the threats, it's off-putting, and so it's driving these other countries together.
I want to run a clip that you and I have seen before because I want to talk to you about Zionism. And this is Senator Ted Cruz, a graduate of Princeton University and Harvard Law School, telling Tucker Carlson that the Bible commands him to support Israel, and that the same Israel referred to in the Old Testament of 3,000 or 4,000 years ago is the same Israel run by Benjamin Netanyahu today. This is mind-boggling. Chris?
Growing up in Sunday school, I was taught from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. So that's in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
Where is that?
I can find it to you. I don't have the scripture off the tip of my.
It's in Genesis, but
where does my support for Israel come from? Number one, because biblically we're commanded to support Israel. But number two,
hold on.
I'm not holding on.
Hold on. You're a senator.
We are commanded to support Israel, and what
does that mean? Israel.
We're told those who bless Israel will be blessed.
But what? Hold on. Define Israel. This is important. Are you kidding? This is a majority Christian country.
Define Israel. Do you not know what Israel is? He's talking about the nation of Israel. Yet nations exist, and he's discussing a nation. A nation was the people of Israel.
Is the nation
They're the descendants
God's
of
referring
Abraham.
to in Genesis, is that the same as the country run by Benjamin Netanyahu right now?
Yes.
It is.
Well, that is just mind-boggling that he believes that he is commanded by the God of the Old Testament to support the government of Benjamin Netanyahu. That is crazy.
Yeah,
But he's not alone, Larry.
Well, yeah, but there's a real cultural divide here. I hadn't really thought about this until the other day. I was having a conversation with a fellow who does a podcast in India, but he's in China right now. And, when you look at China and India, two of the largest populations, they are the two largest populated countries in the world. Christians in China account for maybe 2%. 2 to 5%. It's a similar number in India, and Jews, hardly any presence. So those people, you got billions of people, close to 3 billion people in the world that have never heard about Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, Numbers, those first 5 books of the Old Testament. Yet growing up in what was, a Christian society where that it believes that the Old Testament is the divine word of God, and because it's in there, well, that book was written 2,500 years ago, and it was written by Jewish scholars who were in captivity by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, and naturally, you get a story written from their particular perspective, and they see themselves at the center of the world. But they create this story then, and the belief among the more fundamentalists, both the religious fundamentalists in Judaism and in Christianity, believe, oh no, that was dictated. Moses was writing it down. God was telling it to him, and he wrote it down. And so that's God's word. So once you adopt that mentality, then all of a sudden you can say, yeah, God commands us to kill you. God said this land's our land, not yours. God loves us more than you. And so that entire mentality you saw Ted Cruz. He's not a stupid person. He's a highly educated person. He's a man of great intellect. But boy, he believes some utter nonsense and translates what are from this book written by Jewish scholars 2,500 years ago to, oh, that's a commandment that we got to do it today. And it translates then into policies where we're sending bombs to blow up children. We're sending contractors to distribute food, except they're shooting children and women. And we're allowing a genocide to take place at the very time that, according to the tenets of this book, it is against God's will to kill these people. I mean, it depends. Some section says it's wrong to kill, others says it's okay to kill.
Yeah.
Problem with that.
Well, lest anybody think you're exaggerating, and you're not, here's the modern day iteration of that from Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition in the Knesset. Cut number 1.
The war we are fighting today, which we embarked on the 7th of October, is a war against a Nazi enemy that threatened the existence of the Jewish people in the land of Israel. That is the whole truth. So the Prime Minister decided to do it sequentially. I'm with him. No problem, let's do it sequentially. You eliminated Hezbollah, you dealt a severe blow, maybe even more than that, to Iran. Now the time has come to deal with the Gaza Strip. How do we do that? You take off the gloves, stop the humanitarian aid, cut off electricity, cut off water, start destroying, and expel voluntarily, so to speak, voluntary migration, the Gazans. There are no uninvolved people there, no innocents, no one who isn't guilty. As far as I'm concerned, they're all Hamas members. At the end of the war, there should be 2 images in the Gaza Strip. First, not a single Gazan remains, and all 50 of our hostages, 49 male hostages and 1 female hostage, both living and deceased there, returned to the state of Israel.
Yeah. I mean, it is... If we put a German uniform on the guy and a little, postage stamp mustache, we'd be horrified.
Right.
We'd be horrified. We'd say, never again. It's selective never againism. Because to look at any of these children, these children don't have a choice in where they're born and who they're born to. And the notion that it's okay to kill children, we had guys in the U.S. Army back in the 19th century. He was a preacher. I forget the general's name, but with reference to the American Indians, he said, "Nits make lice." So he was justifying slaughtering the women and children of the Native Americans. So, this is not unique just to these characters, but it embodies a belief and a sentiment that it's ultimate evil in my book.
I don't want to upset your stomach, but here's Mike Huckabe, who's flying on the wings of Zion. That's Netanyahu's plane with him to D.C. They probably landed there now. They're supposed to have lunch with Trump. Here's Huckabe's version of all of this. It's stomach churning. Chris?
You can't have 2 people claiming the same piece of real estate. There are certain words I refuse to use. There is no such thing as a West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. I think we have to recognize there was a Palestinian state. It was called Gaza. Look how that turned out. You can't have a Palestinian state on top of the Israeli state. Israel has a right to its autonomous, indigenous homeland that they've had for 3,500 years, since the days of Abraham.
There's really no such thing as a Palestinian There's really no such thing. That's been a political tool to try to force land away from Israel.
The 2-state solution, if we mean 2 governments holding the same piece of real estate, is irrational and unworkable. The Palestinian state needs to be outside the boundaries of the nation of Israel. There's plenty of land in the world that we could find a place and say, okay, let's create a Palestinian state. There's no such thing as a settlement. They're communities, they're neighborhoods, they're cities. There's no such thing as an occupation.
Well, you can see why he's sitting next to Netanyahu at lunch.
Yeah. Well, what's really fascinating is there's an Israeli scholar at Tel Aviv University. He's written a couple of books. And what he did was tracing genetically the what they call the Ashkenazi Jews on the one hand, and then the ones from the sort of North Africa. And what he's determined is that actually the Palestinians, are more likely, they have more of a genetic connection to, if you will, the biblical Israeli tribes than these folks from North Africa and Europe who have come in and claiming to be the authentic Jews. So, even from that genetic standpoint, and again, here's Huckabe saying this land has been ruled by Israel for 3,500 years. Come on. He's an adult. He's college educated. He's been a governor. That's just simply not true. I mean, the Romans controlled it for quite a while, and then it was taken over by Turks and or Islam before that. I mean, it hasn't been under Jewish. The last Jewish ruler had a connection to the Jews was Herod, and that was 70. And his son or grandson, they got tossed out in 70 A.D. That was it.
Right.
So, if we're going to use the premise, whoever's initially somewhere first, they get it. Well, hey, all Americans that came from European stock, get the hell out of the United States. Not yours.
Nicely put, Larry. Thank you for your time, my dear friend. Thank you for letting me go across the board on all these subjects. We'll look forward to seeing you with that youngster McGovern on Friday. All the best. Have a good week.
I'll be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Coming up later today at 1:00 this afternoon, Scott Ritter. At 2:00, Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.